Welcome back to the Memory Jogger podcast with Jason and Wyatt. This is Jason over here, and over there is Wyatt.
I am over here, but I don't know where here he is, so I could be anywhere, just not in your
Ooh.
underwear.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, as always, we are ready to jog our memories and run down a few childhood dreams, which we hope will actually trigger a few memories of your own as you listen to the show. Well, Wyatt, tonight's episode is going to be our second Memory Jogger special. That is part of another 80s collaboration with our pals from the 80s League. And this time we're here to talk about 80s innovations.
Yes, we've have so many things that have come through the 80s, if not founded in the 80s. It was, I will call it excelled or propelled, whichever term you want to use, in the 80s. And I think it really is just an interesting era. You know, we say we love
Yes.
the 80s, and typically it's due to the toys or cartoons or shows or something like that. But this was actually a good topic that our buddies
Yes.
came up with, and it made me think what were some of the things that came out of the 80s that were uh, really the thing that set the tone for uh, I'll call it
Right.
modern day. Really, 30 years ago, you know, I joke. I know to you quite a bit, but I joke sometimes on our podcast that, you know, Kit is becoming more and more real. I can't exactly claim Kit was an innovation, but in a way he was, because if you think about it,
Right.
everything was married into that car. And even though it took 30 years, 30 plus years, we are starting to get autonomous cars. They aren't
Right.
complete kits, I would call them. They're not jumping. They're not, you know, they don't have the molecular bonded shell. They can't drive through lava like one episode or float on the ocean like the other one. But, you know, we're getting there. The downside
Yeah.
is it's not a Trans Am. We're getting them in, what's the latest model that they're getting? Is it Lexus or, oh, I can't remember who's kind of the leader of the pack right now of making the autonomous, but nonetheless, it's the high end luxury cars.
Right.
It's not a sports car. I mean, come
Might be
here.
might be Tesla. I can't remember.
Yeah, Tesla's the one.
Is it Tesla? Okay.
Yeah. So I
But
keep waiting. Maybe somewhere deep in a dungeon back office somewhere of GM. This is why Pontiac has been banned for a little bit, and they're going to rebirth. They're going to have a retro kit, and it actually is going to work. And you know, every one of us is going to go to the go to the GM dealer or Pontiac dealer, going, "I want kit."
Well, you know, the GM engineers and marketing people, you know, that could be their homework. They're just back there watching Knight Rider episodes, and how can we get this into modern day cars? You know,
I want that job. If all I have to do is watch kit, I'm
right.
I'm 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 fine with that.
Well, this 80s innovations, we tend to think about technology like that and everything that is kind of birthed in the 80s and is commonplace now today, or maybe even some things that they thought were the, you know, next great thing that never really took off. That's what we kind of think about, I guess, when we think of innovations. There's some stuff outside of technology, though, that came out of the 80s that I think we want to discuss tonight, on a, you know, like music level and toys, that kind of thing. Things that we saw that were just like, wow, you know, I can't believe this is available for Santa Claus to bring me, you know, that kind of a thing. But before we get into our you know, regular portion of the podcast tonight, just wanted to say this is part of what we're calling the 80s League over on Facebook. And we wanted to essentially invite more people. If you want to join up, we're doing this, I guess, trying to do this on a monthly basis where we're coming up with a topic and either podcasting or if you just want to do a a blog post, something like that. You can participate in those areas, but it's the same people again. Basically, it's going to be the '80s Reboot Overdrive podcast and blog. We've also got Return to the '80s blog and also now podcast. And then we've got two blogs, Ouija Midget and Killer Kitsch, that are over on WordPress. And we're going to put the links to their contributions up on rediscoverthe80s.com. We'll also put links in our YouTube video if you're listening to this on YouTube. So you can find those easily and kind of keep the conversation going as we do this special episode. Well, we really, I guess, really don't have a format tonight, Wyatt. We basically brainstormed, and I think what we decided on is we've got a kind of a long list here, and we're going to go back and forth, kind of pick and choose maybe some things that are on our mind, maybe our top three, and then maybe we'll just run down the list as some honorable mentions after we go back and forth and talk about some of these things. But I guess before we get technically into the list and start choosing and stuff, I know you mentioned KIT. Technology. Well, before we get into that, I want to give a quick shout out to there's a documentary on Netflix now that was produced by CNN called The '80s, and they've done the '60s and the '70s as well. And it's about I think an 8-part miniseries. But watching that, I got a lot of ideas for this podcast. There was one episode essentially on '80s technology and innovations and such like that that I just started writing a bunch of stuff down. But I would invite people to go over to Netflix and check that out while it's still on there. I'm not sure how long it'll be there. Obviously, at least through the end of January here. But some great episodes on there. There's one on TV, the very first one that was really great. Talked about appointment television, like Who Shot JR, and then the finale of MASH, those kind of things. And then there's one on music and MTV and how that all changed the industry, and then several others, President Reagan, and then this one on the inventions, which is really cool. But I guess, well, since I'm blabbing on, let's go ahead and get into the list. And give me the first thing that kind of came to mind when you're thinking '80s innovations and how that affected your childhood or your household in particular.
Well, as much as I wanted to pick on KIT, when we got the assignment, I really thought, there's going to be someone that picks KIT, and I didn't want to do double up articles. The one that hit me, though, not really as a kid, but I guess more as a teen, was electronic fuel injection. And people were thinking, well, what the heck are you thinking about? And, that kind of thing and technology in the '80s, But if you think about it, I did a little bit of research. EFI has been actually around for quite a while. It just never was able to be marketed because of the expense and the impracticality of the components at the time. We started seeing something in '80 or '81 starting to dawn, but we really didn't get the push until about '86, '87, when that really just was catapulted. Just about every car had some form of EFI attached to it. There were some, I'll call it laggard engines. There were still some that didn't do it. Jeep, AMC, back when it was still AMC, American Motors Corporation or Company, they still had carburetor engines on their vehicles. They had my '86 Turismo had the 2.2, and it was still a carburetor. But I think your mom's Daytona, I want to say it was an '87 or '89, one of the two. It had fuel injected.
And I can remember, When I was first learning how to drive and learning on dad's truck or some other things, you step on the gas before you start the car,
Right.
give it a little fuel. And then when the whole, fuel injection really hit, you didn't do that anymore. That was a
No.
no-no. So that was, kind of how it affected me. And I remember thinking that, as I started driving different cars and such, that it's fuel injection. You just turn the key and it's ready to go.
Right. And I even learned a quirk in my 94 Dakota. It doesn't seem to be the effect doesn't seem to be the same here on any of the newer vehicles I've had, but my 94 would start a little bit, I would call it more prompt. If I let the key turn on and wait till I hear the fuel pump stop,
Uh-huh.
because I would hear it cycle. You hear it bzzzt, and then you would start it, and it would seem to fire a little bit quicker than if I were to, just turn the key and go type of thing. But nonetheless, I mean, if you look at it, the whole topic of EFI was it has spawned generations of itself. You got the multi-port, you got throttle body, you got all these other styles of fuel injection that has turned even staple engines for years. Me being the Dodge guy in the 318, that was Dodge's. Really, that was its trademark was the 318, the 360, and so forth. But for the 318, I have a 318 out in my carport here, my 78 Dodge, and it says it gets a measly 155 horsepower. My V6 that I had in my 94 Dakota had 165. And as the generations have gone, they've been able to tweak it because of all the electronics. I can't remember what they were up to as far as horsepower. I want to say they were in the 230s, 240s of the 318 before they downsized the motor. They went with a whole new platform. They went away from the 318. They went to my my '05 Dakota. No, it wasn't the last year or the first year, but they started making the 4.7 V8, which was a slightly smaller, V8, but it could do the same, if not more horsepower than the 318 and a little bit smaller package. Cut a little bit of weight, get a little, probably another half mile to the gallon or more in a truck. So it was, like I said, this EFI really just catapulted our vehicles into what they are now. And like I said, it's become more reliable. I know early on, and Jason, you remember that ice storm that hit us. Was it 92, 93, that time frame?
93 was the blizzard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I still remember. I had the carbureted old '86 Turismo, and for whatever reason, that thing fired right up. And you could talk to just about anybody, and they were having problems starting their fuel injected cars. It was fouling up the plugs and all types of things. And I remember having to jump your mom's car that one time trying to get it freed up. And luckily it started. I didn't, with everybody else's having bad luck, I kind of thought that was the case. But like I said, EFI is just, it's changed. It keeps changing. I used to say not for the better until I had to actually tinker with my 78 Dodge and the carburetor on it. It makes me appreciate computer modules on the cars all much more. I don't have to sit there and go, oh, it's warm out. I have to tweak the idle and the rich and lean mixture a little bit. Every time it gets too cold, I got to go out and change it again. But yeah, I thought that was quite the innovation for me. What about you? What was your, I would call it number one, or one that really came to mind?
Wow. Well, there's just so many here that I've got listed that, we talked about the VCR already in our, previous show. And, our household was somewhat, late to the show for a lot of this technology, and most of it was budgetary reasons. Back in the day, to get a VCR, you're plopping down a couple hundred, if not more. When they first came out, so it was a while before they became a lot more affordable. But there's a lot of things. I'm going to go to the Walkman as one that it wasn't too far out of the price range. I still have my Walkman. I found it, I don't know, a couple years ago, and now I've misplaced it again because I was gonna get out those some of those mixtapes that I have sitting out in the garage, and I can't find my Walkman now to play them. But anyway, you think about just the portability of it and being able to take your music essentially wherever you wanted to go, as long as you had a couple extra batteries in your pocket to keep that going. But even with that, and then I don't know if they had like the AM and FM radio portable, before the Walkman came out, but that was the deal when you had the radio, and then you could switch over to your Walkman too, and pop in a cassette.
Right. Well, they did have, I don't know if it was separate bands, but I do remember the old portable AM radios. I still have an AM radio. Really, I feel like it's ancient. Honestly, my grandmother gave it to me, and it has its built-in speaker. It's probably about the size of a deck of cards, a little bit thicker, but about this, the height and width of it. And I still have it lingering around. I used to have a Coke bottle AM radio. You twisted the.
I remember those novelty radios.
Yeah. But yes, the Walkman. Mine got stolen, of all things.
Oh wow!
Don't know who took it. I was in my technical training down at Lackland, and I was helping out at the church service there in the sound booth, and laid it there. I'd walk with it, listening to a mixtape probably on the way to the church service, and it basically walked on its own. So,
somebody walked off with it.
That's it. I haven't seen it since. But tell you what, that was a tough old beast, because for me, I wore that thing out. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm surprised it was still working when I got it. And when I first found it, I immediately wanted to show it to my two boys, and I remember this because I was like, face palm. Because one of them asked me, "Oh, Dad, does that thing play records?" No. Records and cassettes are different. Yes, it's music, but get the terminology right there, buddy. So I went through a whole history lesson there on Walkmans.
What fascinates me, though, the terminology, right? So me being at where I was before in the broadcast world, they still use the word tape, even when we don't tape anything anymore. And it was coined, I would say, in the 80s, probably a little bit earlier, but it was really coined, I think, in the 80s when you wanted to tape anything. If you meant audio or you meant video, it didn't matter. You taped it. You didn't record. You taped it, and that's what they've been saying now. You're watching, literally a digital rendition or digital broadcast or something. Well, we taped it last week. You didn't tape it. You freaking DVR'd it. You DVD'd it. You didn't tape it. But no, that's the terminology. And it's actually your boy saying that, just kind of.
Yeah. Well, and I guess to piggyback a little bit off of the Walkman, in the early 80s is when compact discs came out. And then, I think in the early 90s when I got a Discman, and you pop your CD, in the portable player. And that, for the longest time, was my CD player in the car,
Mm-hmm.
because you had those special cassettes. You popped in the cassette player in your car, and then you could fire up the Discman sitting on your passenger seat or wherever you wanted to keep it,
Right.
and play your CDs. And I remember the loudness, the sheer, not necessarily quality, but it just seemed like playing the CD through your audio system in your car versus just a cassette was so much louder, and you could really crank it up then. But then, those early Discmen, you could hit a small pothole in the road and it's skipping.
Oh, yes.
Those things skipped like they were, had jump ropes. It was there was no, like, I remember putting, like, jackets and shirts and stuff in my passenger seat and trying to keep that thing from jumping around and skipping. But that kind of came with the territory once you got into the CD world. But that was and my Discman was actually borrowed and never returned when I was in college, so that thing's long gone.
I never had the Discman. I had the no, I take that back. I did have a Discman. Don't know where it ever ended up. Like you, I did the same thing. Slapped the cassette audio transfer device into my cassette deck to play it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I've had cheaper versions throughout the years. One of which, I swear, you touched it, it skipped. And
yeah.
It like Red Bull, it got wings real quick. But nonetheless, I used to use that for a number of things. In fact, when I was doing my early DJing, I would grab one of those before I ended up getting I'll call it my pro side of the CD drawers.
Gotcha. Well, before we get into the next topic, I hear like something tapping. Is that you? Are you typing, or?
I'm not doing anything.
That was weird. Sounded like a helicopter going over or something. Anyway, so let's get into the next one. What's your next choice into 80s innovations?
Oh, I'm kind of leaning towards Teddy Ruxpin. And it seems like a toy and, whatever, but I was trying to think of what toy or what obscure, I tried to make it obscure, thing came out like robotics.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually, that I don't know why that surfaced in my head, but the Teddy Ruxpin, and I was doing some digging, and it's the first portable animatronics is what they classified as, where
Gotcha.
it actually moved the mouth.
Right.
I won't call it in line with the audio, but they kind of got it close.
Uh-huh.
And you could pick up, a cassette and throw it in there. And I guess the earlier models, you could put you could only put the Teddy Ruxpin cassettes in there, and that was the only thing that it was keyed on it. It was like there was a audio track or something,
like a tone or something.
Right. And that's what triggered that. It knew it was, basically the manufacturer.
See, I always wondered that, because now I never had a Teddy Ruxpin, but I remember the kid that was a couple years younger than me that lived up the street. He had one, and I was all the time wanting to like sneak my Run DMC tape and throw it in there and hear Teddy rap, but I never did. And I always wondered about that. Can it just play normal? Are you going to hear "Living on a Prayer" sung by Teddy Ruxpin, or how that worked?
Right. Well, supposedly the early, maybe it's a flip-flop. The early edition allowed it. Maybe the second gen, the next one, they figured it out, so they put the code on it. I think that's what it was. But nonetheless, I was doing the history on animatronics, and it goes back. Disney was the one that first coined that terminology, and there's huge animatronics all over, but Teddy Ruxpin was the first to come out, and then ever since then we have Uh, I know things have come out, but I'm looking at my son's kid or my boys, uh, their toys and stuff,
Mhm.
and there's so much it either lights up and goes with the beat, or um, there is the puppets. There's the uh, we had for a long time till Adam broke it. We had the Cookie Monster. It kind of talked a little bit, and you threw a plastic cookie in it. Uh, oh, cookie and whatever, and it did its thing. Now we have that Bebo, whatever, has a TV looking
Mhm.
face, and then it has like a 9 LED
Gotcha.
screen on the stomach. And they all dance and stuff. They do
Uh-huh.
more things now,
Oh
but
yeah, we have one of those the dinosaurs. What do they call them? It's gonna kill me now, but this is what Jameson asked for Christmas last year. It's one of those dinosaurs. It comes with a remote, but it's got some sensors in front of it, so you can kind of interact with the dinosaur,
oh, really?
and it does weird things. It'll cluck like a chicken and bark like a dog and pretend it's a zombie and fart, and I mean it does all kinds of different things. Yeah, the technology has just grown and grown and grown since Teddy, which was essentially a portable showbiz pizza,
Right.
I was thinking, and this has kind of hit me uh, recently from going through those Christmas 1985 pictures. I got this gold robot, and I just did a quick search on Google. It's called the Magic Mike robot. Nothing to do with the stripper movie, but everything to do with the robots of the 80s. And this thing was pretty cool. It had a big red button on the top of its head, and you pushed it, and it would go. And I think it was one of those things where it would go until it hit a wall, and then it would back up and go another way until it ran into something, and that was the kind of motion. But the weird thing about it was you could also put a little bit of water in there, and the thing smoked.
That's cool.
It like made a puff of smoke. And it smelled too. I don't know what the mechanism was that made it smoke. I mean, it wasn't as bad as like a cigarette or something, but the fact that it could, just do something different like that made it really cool. And I remember taking it to several people's houses and snapping pictures of it and such. And I found it at I was at a thrift store just this past weekend, and there it was, just sitting there, no price on it. I almost asked to see what they wanted for it. It was, just loose, wasn't in the box or anything. But there was the gold Magic Mike staring right back at me. I had to pick it up and check it out. But yeah, I mean, that was the thing back in the 80s. You think about all those what do they call them, omnibots that they were selling, I guess mainly for kids, but a couple comes to mind. One was in the movie The Night They Saved Christmas. And if you remember that TV movie with Jacqueline Smith, and when they go and visit Santa, they're at Santa's workshop, and here comes, I don't know, I think it was an quote unquote omnibot, but it was one of those things where it could move, and it walked up and, hi, I'm whatever. Would you like to hear a riddle? And it was, it was like, oh my gosh, what would it be like to have a robot in your house and help you out with homework and all that stuff. And then if you remember the most recent Muppets movie, they had that robot that drove the car.
I have yet to. I have yet to see that. I want to.
Yeah, you need to go check it out. Just for that, that was like my favorite part, the '80s robot. He like offers Kermit a new Coke while they're driving. Would you like a new Coke? Anyway, but yeah, I'm on the same wavelength with you, and Teddy, with the way Teddy Ruxpin kind of took off and was the biggest craze of that year. was probably around 85 or 86 when that, hit shelves or something. But yeah, that was a good one, man.
What about you? What's your next? I guess number
Um,
two.
well, I'm gonna go with MTV and just how it changed the way we consumed music. I definitely was not old enough to appreciate it when it first launched in 1981. I was only 5, but it was definitely probably around 8 or 9 when I remember watching MTV on occasion, sometimes late at night when we'd have sleepovers or something, and we were just hysterically laughing at some of these crazy, crazy music videos that they would put on. Um, and it wasn't just it was late at night, but throughout the day,
Right.
it became when you put out an album and your record company or whatever figured out what singles were going to be released from that album, then you built your music videos around those singles that were going to be released from the album. So it was just doing the music videos was a part of just how artists worked. And for some people, it was almost more important the to have a really good music video and to get it on MTV than it was to have a good collaboration of music or putting out a good album.
Right.
And it just kind of consumed the music industry. And of course we got the MTV Video Music Awards that started. I think that was probably mid 80s or maybe a little bit earlier than that. Maybe 83 I think was maybe the first one. um, so that really had an impact. And then I guess bouncing out of MTV, you just got so many new kind of genres of music all kind of mixed together. Because you think about top 40, it was mainly rock and roll and what we would call rock music, that kind of a thing. Sometimes you had some country crossovers in there, but you think about the birth of like rap and hip hop, and you think about like all the new wave bands that came over from England, heavy metal, all of those different genres. MTV programmed around it. You think about Headbangers Ball, that was like
Hmm.
late at night, and they showed all the metal videos. But throughout the day, it was a big mix, and a lot of those bands, especially you think about rap and hip hop, that was a big deal. And there was a lot of artists. One that I saw doing an interview on that miniseries the other night was David Bowie, and he was like, "Why aren't you showing the black artists on MTV?" And well, we just go with the popular music, blah blah blah, and they were coming up with some excuse, and he was like, "Oh well, there you have it." It was that there was a lot of these artists that were fighting in on the side of we got to do everything. We got to just open up the Pandora's box of the music industry and start playing, R&B and rap and then also some of these others that are coming in, the metalheads and all of the crazy new wave bands as well. So I don't know. I mean, did you watch a lot of MTV growing up? And I mean, how big was an impact of MTV was on what you essentially went out and purchased or listened to?
Uh, I didn't do much watching of it in the 80s, but I did early 90s. Typically, right
Mm-hmm.
before school is when I'd watch it. Uh, or like you, when the MTV awards were on, I would somehow watch it. I watched it, I think, 2 or 3 years. I don't think I was
Mm-hmm.
very. It wasn't appointment TV by any means. Uh, but as far as influencing me, I was listening to it before I watched the video. So so it wasn't the videos never influenced me
Mm-hmm.
as much as what was on the radio. What would I guess piqued my interest is how at times, not always, but at times they actually had something different. Like
Mhm.
uh, like there was the radio cut and then there was the video cut when it came to the music.
Gotcha. Yeah.
One that springs to mind, and I don't know why, was um, Mariah Carey's. Was it Someday?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
You lost me
radio.
with Mariah Carey. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it was a very short lived crush on her, but I think it was Someday. Anyway, uh, there was the radio cut was
Mhm.
different than the video. The video, uh, I don't had a little more zip to it, I guess is but it's the best way to
Yeah.
put it. It was different. It's just a different
Yeah.
tone, so I
Well,
liked it.
there's
But otherwise, I mean, MTV really didn't influence me all that much. If anything, you influenced me. I mean, that's how I learned how I gravitated or liked Aerosmith or Run DMC. Heck, we both got, I think, in the same time, got hooked on Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince.
yeah.
So
Yeah, they had some popular music videos too, and yeah, I mean, there was a lot of those videos that took it the extra mile, told a story, or tried to do a small little, episode or production or something wrapped around a song. Um, Probably the most famous one you think about is Michael Jackson's Thriller, and that was I think it's like a 13-minute music video, and they have that whole story set up, and then you have almost like an extended cut of the song, especially in the middle of that bridge when they do the zombie dance. That goes on for several minutes just in itself,
right,
and and then they finish out the story at the end. I remember here's an impact moment, and I could be wrong about this, but this is somehow etched in my brain. I don't know if I brought it up on the show before or not, but I have a memory of going to the roller skating rink and they showing music videos while they, played the tracks uh, you would normally hear. And they showed Michael Jackson's Thriller or some version of it while we were roller skating. And the parents got upset and made them, essentially stop showing the music videos at the roller skating ring at the skate station in Clearfield. And that would have been early on, that would have been when I was 7, 8 years old, when I remember that happening. So I don't know. Anyway, I guess the point being is that MTV went beyond, just what was shown on TV, and that, you put the music videos up in the skating rinks and bowling alleys and wherever you're going. So instead of just hearing the music, you're also getting some visual entertainment as well.
right.
So,
Well,
well,
I don't remember the videos there at the
mhm.
skate station, but I do remember jamming out to basically whatever the DJ was playing, and I was
Yeah,
always curious. I always wanted to go up there and see what the library was up there.
yeah. It was, pretty neat setup, I think. And it was on that back wall. I remember them having a screen that pulled down, but I don't know. I'd like to wonder if the original owners are still there or something. Figure out if that factoid was true. But anyway, I could go on and talk about music forever, but let's go on to your next choice.
Well, my next choice would probably be our cell phone, and uh, basically, I know that cell phone has been around to a degree for quite some time. The military had their version of it back in I know Vietnam, probably earlier days.
Hmm.
In fact, you see uh, some movies or even shows, maybe MASH, where they pull the handset out and you wind it up, I guess, to charge the battery or dial or whatever. I don't know how it worked. Me being in the military, and I
Right.
never saw one of those suckers. Uh, but nonetheless, I mean, that was a cell phone. But to get it into a person's hand or car, rather,
Right.
um,
Right.
it was, it was really the 80s. I can't remember the guy's name. He did make the handheld one, and every now and then you actually see him on a commercial. Uh, there was a commercial just not too long ago where it showed him, probably a younger him, uh, on the handheld one that you typically see on Saved by the Bell, where you see Zach uh, calling
Right.
or pranking someone. Uh,
Those big brick phones, the gray ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I had a the bag phone, aka the car phone, for years in my little Turismo. Uh, I I learned real quick. I made very very few phone calls on that sucker. That was back when it was the cheapest time to call was at after 7, and it was a quarter a minute. So I made my necessary calls short and sweet to the
Right.
point. Uh,
I remember not I don't remember ever having a car phone or even cell phone up until I was in, I think, probably my first year in college when I got my first cell phone. But uh, just going and watching Miami Vice and watching all those seasons on Netflix a couple years ago, that was standard. They had the car phone in there in the Ferrari, and then what kind of impacted me more was the cordless phone, where you could, you had the handset with that long silver antenna that you pulled out,
yeah,
and you had all of what, about 20 feet it seemed like,
it seemed like it on
that
some,
you
yes.
could go away from the actual receiver or whatever. And yeah, I don't know, that somehow was cool. We could go out. We had a breezeway in between our house and the garage, but there's a porch swing out there, and my mom would be out there on that cordless phone talking to whoever. And just the fact that you could do that was pretty cool back then. Even though you had that that pointer, chalkboard pointer, essentially on on
Oh
the
yeah,
headset, that antenna that you had to pull out 6 feet, it seemed like.
yeah. I remember
Cool.
those. They could probably be on the same innovation, uh, because
Hmm.
you could. It was a portable telephone, like you said. You could just go anywhere to a degree. You could go anywhere. I remember testing that, seeing how far I could go with it. Um, at somewhat, depending on the phone or where I was, I could get out to my like my dad's garage, which was quite a distance for what
Hmm.
it was.
Hmm.
But yeah, I remember
Cool.
those things. But yeah, and with the cell phone, I mean, push it up to now, our cell phones are not computers anymore. But without that cell phone, we wouldn't, the start of the cell phone, where would we be right now? Type of thing. I mean, we carry tablets, but would there be a cell or a Wi-Fi or anything built into it had it not been for that
Right.
wireless technology that came out?
Yeah.
What about you? What's your
Definitely
number
agree.
3?
Uh, you know what? I don't know if this was necessarily an 80s thing. It was probably invented way before that, and I was trying to do a quick little lookup, but I think mainly for residential use, microwaves were an innovation of the 80s. And not necessarily, well, I guess mainly we used it for leftovers at first, but then it became more of a, well, we could do whole meals in the microwave. I lived on nuked food for pretty much my entire high school years. My mother, I mean, she would cook some, but it seemed like there was so much geared towards microwave cooking back in the 80s too, like in frozen foods and such. Um, One of my favorite things to get was these hot dogs that had either cheese or chili in the middle. Do you remember those?
Oh yes.
And it was all about quick meals and snacking and stuff. back when I was in high school and even a little bit before that. And mom would get those and we'd pop in the microwave. And I always got the chili ones, and that stuff inside was like lava, man. It was so hot. On the outside, you could just, oh, this is a nice hot dog. You bite into it, and your mouth is literally scalding. But the microwave, we got our first one, I would say probably mid 80s, I would say. And, it was the turn dial kind of a thing. And then I remember probably later in the 80s, I don't know if it conked out or what, but we upgraded and we got the push button one, and that was a big deal. Yes. That you could just push a couple buttons and cook your food. But I guess what did you get your first microwave in your household? Was it in the 80s?
It was. I was still in Dory Street, and it was a big honking monster. I remember that thing.
Yeah, they were, man. There was no small one back then. It was like there was a standard size, and that was the size you got across the board.
Yeah, which was size mediocre. But yeah, it was a big honking machine. I don't know that we used it all that much, mainly because it took such a draw at the time on the what do you call it, on the electric, the household electric. Oh, yeah. So we only used it few and far between. But when we did, it was, like I said, it was a beast.
Yeah.
We still made popcorn in the old oil bath popper, so we really never got the microwave popcorns.
Oh man, we were all about the microwave popcorn back then.
Man, I can't remember what we nuked in that thing. Probably a wise thing, not knowing. But nonetheless, I mean, I just remember it then, and then yeah, we just, I mean, we use it almost for anything and everything now.
Yeah. Back then, for me, it was all about the snacks. It was like you get those hot dogs, you get those bagel bites, or the what was the other one's called? The pizza. Oh, it's gonna kill me. But you throw those in the microwave, nuke them up, and eat those for snacks and things like that. Didn't do a lot of like meals, the TV dinners kind of a thing in the microwave. It was more or less all about the snackage. I remember using it for, and leftovers, that kind of a thing. The pizza rolls, those kind of snacks. So, yeah, I grew up on nuked food, so hopefully I won't have too many problems later in life.
Well, I don't. Just about everything is nuked anymore for us, so it doesn't matter to me. But yeah, I know growing up, my mom was very reluctant in using it for, it was kind of a new thing, so he didn't know what it did or didn't do. So we just didn't
gotcha.
use it all that much. I don't remember. I'm sure there were some TV dinners because I remember eating those. Again, they were few and far between. My mom liked cooking, and to her, it was nothing. So however long it took her to make a meal, she might have used it to defrost things out of the freezer. But
right, yeah, that was a big thing too when that first came out, was being able to defrost it, and then you throw it in the regular oven or on top of the stove or something,
right,
get things going. But okay, well, I guess we've both chosen 3.
Yeah.
So far, so let's just run down our list real quick here.
Okay.
And if we got any thoughts, going back and forth, we can throw them out there. I mentioned the VCR before. What about the answering machine? Did you guys ever have an answering machine?
We did. It wasn't until, I think it was the late 80s before we finally had one, and it was, I want to say it was the cassette. It was the big, standard cassette that we had.
Yeah, not the micro cassette.
No, and we still had to, make our own, or there was the default. There was a default cassette that
Uh-huh.
came with it that you could use, or you inserted your own and made your own recording.
Yeah.
Um, we had that for years. Both parents. Uh, I know when I was there, I'm fast forwarding, but
Uh-huh.
uh, I remember when I was in Scott Air Force Base, and the thing there, I don't know what it was to have your own custom, funky uh, answering or voice message.
Right. Yeah.
And the one that still got you, I wish I would have kept that little micro cassette just because it was funny. Was I had figured out a way, and of course, here I am with a boom box, or a small boom box rather, up against the mic of the answer
Answer
machine.
machine.
But it's the technical difficulties thing from our radio station there in Clearfield.
Nice.
And I remember, I had figured out to get the music, just a little bit of music, and then it goes, "We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by." And then a little bit of music, beep, and the message till I remember it because it was so hilarious. I laughed my butt off. Was you called me, and then your voicemail was nothing, laughing, 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 laughing. Ah, forget it, and hung up.
That sounds,
Because you couldn't get it, like you were
sounds right.
laughing so hard about it. But
Yeah, you got me.
but it played a role. And my mom always thought my phone line was broke. She never got it. But
That was a big deal back then. You having like a cool message, just in the last I don't know, several months. Again, I'm on YouTube. I just go from video to video. That right hand column on YouTube like owns me. But I was clicking through and I came upon this old infomercial, or not really an infomercial, but a commercial for like a pre-recorded answering machine tape. It was just full of messages, and it was little silly songs. There was like the rap, and it was like, "We missed your call. I'm not at home. But leave a message, and we'll, whatever." And
right.
this guy was rapping, and then there was like Beethoven. It was like, "Nobody's home."
Yes, I remember
Nobody's
those.
home. And then it would go on. There was like several different messages. I mean, so that was the big thing back then. You had to have a cool message on your answering machine, and I don't remember until like the 90s, early 90s, when I remember having an actual answering machine and then trying to come up with something funny or cool
Right.
for when people called. But I mean, that was a big thing. Have to have something cool on your messages, and then checking your messages was a event in its own. You walk in the door and don't bother me, I gotta check my messages. Part of your daily routine.
Right. But
Okay,
looking back at the
yeah.
looking back at the answer machine, had it not been for that, here we are. We're at voicemail, digital, voicemail now.
Mhm.
But it was so fun, like you were saying, with all the different jokes you could have with it, and fun.
Yeah.
And even Verizon, I don't know if they still do it, but Verizon uh, I guess it's not a voicemail, but when you're ringing the phone, you can
Mhm.
play music instead of being ring, ring, ring. You hear
Right. You
Bon
can change
Jovi
it.
or something playing while you're waiting.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So that was another one that came out of the 80s. The camcorder. Did you have a camcorder?
no, I never had a
Yeah.
camcorder growing up. I've seen them, not in a museum, but I have seen them, and
Yeah.
they were big beasts. But yeah, I never had
Yes,
one.
they were. They were huge. I don't remember.
Well, I do
Uh
remember operating one
huh.
there at school. Uh, Mr. Smeal would ask me to videotape the
The
games,
basketball games. Yeah, that's
and
right.
I remember making him sick, and I never videotaped again.
Test
Because
match.
well, it was funny because he had me in specifics. I guess it was that way even then. But he says, I want you to make sure that keep the lens, keep your focus on the ball. Okay, I did. That's all you saw most of the game was the ball. You didn't see anybody else. You didn't see the team. You didn't see half court. You just saw the ball bouncing up and down
That's
along
weird.
with the camera.
Yeah. We didn't, I don't remember having a camcorder growing up, or nobody comes to mind really that had one, even in our family. We got one. This was right before the smartphone, era. This was probably around it was after we were married. So early 2000s, we got a small camcorder when kids want to send video to the parents who are 1,000 miles away. Yeah, we got a video camera. Still got a bunch of those tapes actually of Jackson, who's now, going on 13 this year, when he was a baby. So yeah, I was late in the game to that kind of a thing. And then, once the smartphones came out, it was like, why do I have this gadget?
Right.
So it's probably, I think we might still have it. It's just sitting in a box somewhere. Anyway, so camcorders, yes. You think about video games and specifically arcades, and then of course the mid 80s, I think 85, when it was kind of, there was a video game industry crash in 1983, where it was right after Atari messed up, and they're making all of these cartridges. They were talking ET, and there's actually beyond ET, it was ET and Pac-Man and all of these cartridges that they're just flooding the market with, and they had this return policy. And anyway, that almost killed off the whole home console industry before the NES came in 85. And then from there, it was, we've been evolving consoles, for 30 years now. So that was a big deal. And we talked a little bit about our home video consoles, but, arcades too, man. That was a big thing. From that documentary, I remember this. There was a point where the video arcade business, the industry, outsold like movies, like Hollywood. There was like $6 billion or something of just quarters, basically.
Nice.
from the arcade industry. It was huge, man. Big, if you think about that, bigger than the box office, the movie box office takes. So that was a huge industry that really hit the ground running at the beginning of the 80s, and just built and built and built until essentially Mario killed it off.
Right.
In all the home consoles, but
right. And all those arcades, they were honestly they were the start of a big fad. I mean, look at it now. We now have it on our cell phones or tablets. Yeah. Even the cheap tablets, you buy it CVS or whatever for $50. You can still download games off of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I still remember the mini Pac-Mans that made that annoying, awful sound. But you loved it because it was like, I got a portable Pac-Man, yay!
Yeah. I had Donkey Kong.
Yeah,
the top Donkey Kong, and that was another thing too that really took off. You think about Radio Shack and how that Radio Shack was huge in the 80s, and it was all about those little LCD handheld games, and just the way those kind of evolved into the late 80s with the Game Boy really becoming the first like handheld, with cartridges and all that, and how that's, been evolved over the last, 25 years.
Right.
Actually getting closer to 30 with the Game Boy. But yeah, that was a whole other industry in itself that really boomed in the 80s. I remember having a Pac-Man watch that you could play Pac-Man on.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, those were Those were everywhere. Uh, we touched a little bit on this in our Christmas gift episode with the personal computer.
Mm-hmm.
You had the Texas Instruments. What was it? TI 99 4A. I think I
Yeah,
want to say.
yeah. And
You
I
ever
know
had
there's a
the
model, different model. You know,
yeah
4 or 4A or not the
yeah.
4A. I don't know, but yeah, I had that one.
Well, the personal computer was just huge in the 80s, and if you don't think that it was, head on over to the archive, the Internet Archive, and search magazines, and there is hundreds of just personal computer and video gaming magazines that were published in the 80s. It's almost overwhelming to me to think about how big that just kind of took off, and then you have all these this whole community of people, feeding in information and learning how to do this and that, and the skies were the limit with those things, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
Um, so that whole making a computer the part of your household, and then the early stages of the internet and how they hooked up through telephone lines, and through the 90s and the dial-up modems, and what it is today. But uh it's really interesting to me. I started watching, I don't know if you've watched this show on AMC called Halt and Catch Fire. It's all about the early days of computing, and it's set in the 80s. It's more or less fiction, but they use some of the bigger name companies, as they have this company that they made, and different things, and like the early stages of chat rooms and the internet, and all that. It's been a pretty fun show. I think they're up to season maybe 3 or 4 now. I think I've watched through season 3, and I like that sort of a thing. And it's, like I said, it's fiction. It's not all based on the actual timeline of how personal computers came about in the 80s. So if you can get around that, it's a pretty fun show to watch. Kind of like with the Goldbergs. You watch the Goldbergs and you're like, oh wait, that song didn't come out when that video game was out, and why is this whole time it's 1980 something, how they bill it. So if you can get
Right.
past that, it's a fun show. But
Right.
yeah,
I
you
know
were
that.
one of the earlier ones that got a personal computer, at least in my
Yeah.
circle.
Right. And like I said, and I think our uh, Meet Us episode, it was really because my dad wanted us to learn more than just playing the
Mm-hmm.
games. And I did program with it. I went through the book,
Mm-hmm.
but the downside with all the programming is how long do you want to spend on it? Because you programmed it, and usually you lost it. Just there was no save unless
You had the
like I said,
cassette,
years later
yeah.
we had that, or you bought the very
Floppy.
expensive floppy drive, which was just a phenomenal cost. But uh, nonetheless, it was.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. Maybe it's just because I had it and I'm jaded, but I really enjoyed having. I still have it to this day. I I haven't broken it out for a few years, but
Mm-hmm.
what I have done, uh, I ended up having to buy a new uh, the TV controller, or the rather the TV module that hooks up in the back of the TV. I had to
Mm-hmm.
buy a new one of those, and I don't know how I ever lost it, but I lost uh, the speech synthesizer adapter that uh, I never knew what that thing did. I mean, it made it speak. I got that, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a little door that opened up. No idea what that did. It's like you don't put anything in it. There's no like extra cartridge or whatever. I never understood what it did, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, I enjoyed it. I'm actually going through eBay now just out of curiosity. So many people want to get rid of this thing. There's probably about 50 of them for sale right now, and they vary. There's some that say that's new in box for like $200 or $300, and then there's you can tell people just want it out of their closets. $30, go.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but
There's a lot of stuff like that.
yeah, but I remember us at school we were using that Apple IIc, I think is what it was,
Yes.
and I remember learning that pretty well. And I still remember that Mr. Moore screaming at me, which he often did anyway at anybody. But I remember him screaming at me specifically because he said, "Don't touch the computers. You just wait for me." And he went back probably 2 minutes or whatever. And here I am trying to see if one of my programs that I had, I remembered off by heart. I'm sitting there trying to see if the Apple will respond to it. And he's like, "What did I tell you? Don't touch the computer. You don't know what you're doing." I'm like, "Yes, I do. I have a computer at home." Yeah, he didn't like back talking either. You easily
Yeah.
walked out of rooms if you back talked him.
Oh yeah, we could tell a bunch of stories on him.
Oh yeah.
And maybe we will someday. But I remember those Apple IIs. It was gaming. It was all about gaming for me on
For
those things.
Mostly for
And
me for the Apple because I liked watching. What was that? It was a typing game that we used to love playing. I can't remember what it was called.
there was a couple of them. There was one where I think it was like missiles or something.
It's kind of like
Like,
Space Invaders, but the quicker you type,
right,
the more shots you got off.
right. And then there was a Snoopy game too where it was like learning how to type and where the keys were and stuff. And
Oh yeah.
Mr. States would get so pissed at us for, you got to stare at the screen. Stop looking at the keyboard. I'm going to shut it off. So then you try to actually do it and you're like, oh, I suck at typing. And then there was another game called Agent USA. You remember this one?
Oh yes.
Where you're this like little hat with legs, and you went across the country and you're trying to find this bomb. The fuzz bomb
Yeah.
is what it was called, and it was basically this TV with legs, and it would go across the country and it would affect other people, and then it would like infect cities and like a virus, and you had to get these crystals, and once you laid them out, like if one of the people that were infected touches the crystals, and then you turn into a regular person again, then you got to get so many, and then you got to touch the fuzz bomb and you win the game. But you would, get on the train and you try to skip in without getting a ticket. You just time it right and jump on the train. Oh man, we played that forever.
Yes, we did.
On there, and this makes me want to play it right now. It was fun, and it was simple too. It wasn't like,
oh yeah.
It was basic, but nonetheless, it kept our attention, and I was all the time wanting to play that on that computer. But okay, well, let's go on. We got a couple other things here, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. One thing I wrote down was the space shuttle,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly the Columbia Space Shuttle was the first one. I think that was maybe 82, 83. Can't remember off the top of my head. I watched it the other night there on that documentary, and how much that just changed the whole, space game, being able to take a shuttle up into space and bring it back and land it,
Right.
and reuse it. Just being able to do that, and how much money NASA probably saved. And then of course the fateful day when the Challenger exploded, and how much that kind of impacted us personally as kids. I remember watching that in the lunchroom. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I can remember watching in the lunchroom, and then we basically left early that day to be, with our families right after lunch.
Well, I was actually homesick.
Oh, really?
I can't remember what exactly I was watching beforehand. But I was homesick, and I remember laying on our couch, and I'm just watching it go up, and kaboom! I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Or what just happened? And yeah, I was just shocked is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean that was again, that was back in the time when TV was everything, and um, appointment television. There was, the teachers and such that were trained and were going to go up in the space shuttle, and the whole country was watching, and just the effects of that nationwide was just, ripple effect. And it's just one of those where were you moments that will stick with you and became etched as part of the 80s, when that happened. But it's still, I can't remember if it was about a year later when they went up again and, dedicated that flight to the crew and pushed forward, too. So it was a tragedy that was essentially overcome.
Right.
Not forgotten, but push forward and learn from mistakes and so forth. But yeah, that was a huge part of the 80s, and being able to do that. And then I think we pretty much talked about everything else on our list. We did get one tweet. I tweeted out a quick little message about what was your favorite, innovation or invention of the 80s. At J Swash said, given the hours of traveling I did in the late 80s, would probably say the Walkman. Hello, mixtape.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said the McRib would be a close second. I didn't even think about food. But McRib, yeah. Oh my gosh, I love those things. I try to stay away from McDonald's if I can. I get the fries suck me in usually.
Yep.
When I'm going for a McDonald's binge. Sworn off the fast food burger now for several years. I'm trying to stay away from those things. But the McRib, I will make a special trip to McDonald's when those McRibs come out every year to get one of those and just to be a sloppy mess. But man, my mother liked them too, and we always I felt like it was a triumphant day when we were watching television. We see the commercial that the McRib is back. We're like, yeah, let's throw a party, But I don't know. I guess fast food had been around forever, but it seemed like there was some things like that maybe that the 80s really pumped up. I wonder if the Shamrock Shake was an 80s thing. I was thinking maybe it might have been a little bit earlier, but it seemed like they had those gimmicks back then, and the Happy Meals, and how they tied those in with all of the properties and cartoons and such. And they had Dukes of Hazzard Happy Meals with the little plastic cars and stuff, and they got real creative with the Happy Meals too.
Right. Well, you just asked, here's your answer to your question.
Mm-hmm.
The Shamrock Shake, at least according to Wikipedia, it started in 1970.
Oh, wow.
But yes, it was, it started out, 1970, but it didn't really get marketed until the 80s is when it really got marketed.
Okay.
So yeah, they marketed, I guess, better.
Yeah. Invented earlier, but really pushed nationwide.
Right. And even if you think of the gaming console, Pong was the very first one. It came out in 78, 79. Even your handheld.
Earlier than that, I think.
It might have been. And then your handheld arcades, if you think about those old, like that football game you had, I think it started out in the late 70s.
Mattel electronic football and baseball. Yeah, those were in the 70s. Mm-hmm.
So, but really, like you said, everything kind of just got catapulted in the 80s. And I think what helped it really was because of that FCC ruling where they could really just push any and everything into our brains.
Yeah, the marketing floodgates were opened.
That's it. And I think that's what helped it. It was that, because, of course I would have been like 4 or 5, but when even if you were to have walked into a Radio Shack in '86, had it not been, if the FCC law had not been lifted, would you think you'd probably be more apt to go visit Radio Shack more to go see what the latest and greatest is because you couldn't see it on a commercial, or
Yeah.
or you wouldn't be able to watch, uh, Mask and go see the latest transforming car,
Right, right. Yeah,
So
it turned the whole industry, the toy industry, basically on its head, because up until that point it was okay, you can push a cartoon on kids, it's got to have some value, and then you can build off of that series, toys and whatever else. And it just turned that upside down, where it was like the toy companies were, all right, we're going to create this and start manufacturing these toys, and then now we're going to build a cartoon around that to get kids to watch.
right.
So it just flipped that whole. And that was, I think, in 80 or 81, I think, when Reagan signed that FCC act.
I know
And
it was early because that's about when Transformers and everybody else came out.
well, yeah, it was, I believe it was He-Man. He-Man was the biggest hit first. I want to say that was like 82 or 83. And then, from there you get G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, the whole nine was, the half-hour toy commercials. And, that's why we had those PSAs at the end. That was their their compliance a little bit to make it a somewhat educational,
Yeah.
to get around some of those rules that were still in place. But yeah, I mean, you could basically get in people's pockets first and then build a TV show to tell them why you should like this,
Right. And it worked.
It did. And just, I don't, I'm not one of those people that's going to say, oh, that was the wrong thing to do. And just Saturday mornings was, the greatest day of the week. And then later on it was afternoons in syndication and stuff when those shows would come on. And gosh, we just had everything back then as a kid. And I don't know, there's sometimes I think when I'm thinking about my boys and my little girl and their experience now, it's just so much different. And their brains are mainly wrapped around technology and in games, and ours was just grabbing a bowl of cereal and your favorite blanket, flip over a futon, make a fort, and watch your watch your shows on Saturday morning.
Oh yeah.
That was the whole week revolved around that. So anyway, I could go on that for a long time. But,
I think we both could.
anyway, thank you, Jay, for chiming in on Twitter. And as always, you guys can reach us at RD80s on Twitter if you got some feedback on the show. And occasionally I will throw a question out there before we record so we can get some instant feedback. But I think that's going to about do it, man. We covered a lot on this show.
Yeah, we did. And awesome stuff.
Kind of ad-libbing and on our experience, these are the kind of shows that I like, where it's good taking notes and you want to have a show to for people to listen to that's interesting and somewhat entertaining, but just kind of feeding off our memories, man. It was fun.
Oh yeah, always. Well, I guess that wraps it up. So we want to thank you once again for joining us on our special edition 80s Innovations. We enjoy collaborating with our friends of the 80s League, and we also invite you to collaborate with us. Shoot us comments of today's episodes or ideas or maybe memories you may have that might spark topics for us. We're always looking for that. We will never shun away a topic. We might actually not even have it in our list. So, but nonetheless, thank you all for your intrigue, being fans, and we invite you to come back next time. Same bat time, same bat channel on the Memory Jogger.